Venture Captain Sheila Hydemarch approached the group whilst they were gallivanting around Sandpoint with a quest that seemed too intriguing to turn down. Sheila told the group of the peculiar events in the nearby village of Galduria, rumours of the dead rising at night, along with a recent attack on an elderly woman in the town. All this under the shadow of the mysterious Twilight Academy, whose dabbling in the dark arts surely had something to do with these recent, shadowy happenings. Travelling for less than a few days, they arrived at Galduria, encountering no resistance on the way. Once inside the village, they decided to patronize the local tavern, where they met the barman, Eldon Forber. Forber didn't seem forthcoming about the town, and any attempt to bring up the local disturbances saw him recluse himself. Markhill tried to get him to write in his bar diary, but Forber refused. However, after Markhill bought him a couple of beers and put a little bit of gold on the table, he found it was a bit more easy to prompt Forber, and in fact he revealed that he had been bribed by some local ruffians who he had overheard bragging about beating up an old hag outside his bar. Upon further prompting by fried chicken connoisseur Geppetto, Elber revealed that it was a dark assault that took place upon the old hag's body. He told the gang where the hag lived, they finished their drinks, and they moved on. Back out into the streets, the group moved towards the outskirts of the town, trying to find this hag's house. Mar held back, whilst the others bundled up to the door. Attempting to make the woman feel at ease, they decided to shuffle Geppetto to the back of the group. After knocking, Hazelindra opened the door and allowed the group to come into their house. Rather oddly, considering she was in a fragile state, having been attacked only a few nights previous. After receiving a nice, friendly kiss from Rudianos, the witch began to make tea for the group, while Rosardo rather rudely looked through the house to see if there was any good magical items he could use. He found none. Hazelindra explained that she was a member of this Twilight Academy, and that she thought she knew what had happened. On the night she was attacked, a black candle was stolen from her. Once lit, she explained, this candle could raise the dead, and it could only be put out with blood. After hearing what they wanted, the group attempted to make a swift exit from the house. Hazelindra attempted to persuade Rudianos to stay for longer, but he shook her off and they went back to the centre of the village. Some local gossips were pointing and whispering about this group that had appeared in town, and seeking more information, Rudianos and Wizard, flanked by the rest of the group, tried to talk to the peasants about the situation. However, they were unforthcoming, and the peasants' stench was offensive. Rudianos and Wizardo, looking at each other, decided to take matters into their own hands, grabbing one of the peasants by the throat and demanding information. The little knowledge they did have was brought forward. Once the old man had heard drunken singing at the graveyard one night, before the curfew had been set in place. The gossips now certainly had something to talk about, but the local guards, watching on in the situation, did not look best pleased. Not liking what they were seeing, Mar and Stavron peeled away from the group to monitor the situation from afar. The guards came over and warned Rudianos and Wizardo that they wouldn't take any malicious actions in this town lightly. The warrior and wizard attempted to get information from the guards now, but they were quickly sent on their way. Rudianos and Geppetto then ventured on to the local church. Rudianos walked inside and looked around to see if there was anything in there, but there wasn't any sign of life. Geppetto, in the meantime, having previous knowledge of secret, sordid basements within Desna churches, went round the back of the church and found a trapdoor that led to a basement. Inside he found a book and immediately stuffed it in his bag. Rudianos headed round to meet Geppetto and noticed nothing out of the ordinary. Meeting back up in the centre of the village, the group now split. Mar and Stavron went back to the bar. hoping to find out more about the whereabouts of the graveyard they kept hearing so much about. Rudianos and Wizardo decided to go back to Hazelindra, who had been so welcoming earlier, hoping there to find out where the graveyard was. Geppetto followed along behind to the hag's house, unbeknownst to the other two. It was agreed after finding this information they would regroup at the bar and take the quest forward from there. Inside the bar, Eldon was sorry about how he had acted earlier and really wanted to write in Mar's bar diary. Drinks were being bought, and now, in a friendlier state, Eldon revealed that he knew the graveyard they were talking about. It was about a mile west of the town. Satisfied with the information, Stervrond and Mar had a drink and waited for the rest of the group. Over at Hazelindra's house, Wizardo waited outside whilst Rudianos put on a charm offensive to get the information out of the witch. What took place inside the house shouldn't really be noted in the annals of this group, but the end result was that Rudianos had acquired the information that he needed. He went back out to Wizardo, and they headed west of the town to find this graveyard. Perched hidden on the windowsill, hearing and unfortunately seeing the events that took place between Rudianos and the witch, Geppetto knocked on the door and entered the house. He took out the book he had found at the church, and after story time with Hazelindra, Geppetto had heard the town priest's Amelon Burm had written a diary, and the last entry of this book said that he was heading out to that graveyard to investigate what was going on. Hearing this, Geppetto made a swift exit and chased after Rudianos and Wizardo with the new information. Back at the tavern, Stervrond and Mar had stopped drinking after a few beers. They were now watching Eldon Forbear playing the air guitar whilst he hopped along his bar, a tie previously unworn now fastened to his head. The music was bad, and the company was worse, but still, Mar and Stervrond sat and waited. A rather out-of-breath Geppetto caught up with Rizzardo and Rudianos, though, and started to talk to them about the priest. The priest! He had found out the clue about the priest. Rudianos and Rizzardo, though, didn't really care. After calming Jup down a little bit, they decided they should go down into the mausoleum, which stood tall within the graveyard, as there was a faint flickering of light coming from inside. Once down in the mausoleum, Rudianos saw two coffins ahead of him. On the furthest coffin, a candle was burning. Moving forward towards this candle, Rudianos threw his torch into the middle of the room. Landing and illuminating the surrounding area, it was just a little too late as 4 skeletons came upon him. He swung his sword violently at the most threatening looking of them, but could only knock off a few ribs. Wizardo and Geppetto now jumped in to help, but Wizardo was also attacked and fending off the jabs of 2 skeletons himself. Swinging his sword, Rudianos was constantly hitting the space between the bones where guts and muscles would usually lie. Eventually the numbers game got the better of him, and Rudianos, poked and prodded, succumbed to his wounds, slumped down to the floor, dead. Back in the tavern, though, the 2 heroes were still waiting for their group to come back. They had what they needed, the location of the graveyard as they'd agreed, and they were ready to kick some ass. Unfortunately, the only thing they would end up doing on this fateful night was watch a now fully drunken Forber try and hit on the ladies in his bar, and that also was not going well. Back in the mausoleum, Geppetto was now fighting the skeletons off, deflecting most of their attacks with his shield whilst Rizzardo jumped out, firing magic missiles into the slightly more limited skeletons. Finally, after a final giant cut, Geppetto, with a bone-shattering explosion from Wizardo, the skeletons were no more. Bones lay shattered on the ground. They quickly tended to the fallen Rudianos, and using a scroll of resurrection, unique and exclusive to them, got Rudianos back on his feet. Geppetto walked over to this black candle, and cutting his palm, released some blood that snuffed it out instantly. Back in town, Stevrond and Mar found out that they had been left behind on the adventure, and they were furious. They would have got as drunk as Eldon had they known they wouldn't be fighting that evening. The group bickered a little, but eventually settled and stayed at Eldon Forber's tavern for the next 7 days, paying their dues and eating as much as they could. Then they went back to Sandpoint, and upon returning into the town they met Sheila Hydemarch, who was so pleased with the result of all the heroes' work, gave them all a firm handshake and a nice well done, and nothing else. With this, the group then made plans never to deal with Sheila again, agreeing that she was a cheap partner to do business with.